Okay, let's go ahead and explore this second form here. Let's submit it and see what happens when we do. I'm going to go ahead and input my name, my email address, and a quick comment. I'm also going to check that I am interesting and I'm wearing matching socks, because I am. And I'm going to click submit. Okay, now this output isn't very pretty, but if we look back at the code, we'll understand what's going on here. So I'm going to jump back to my editor, and let's go ahead and start from the top again. So we initialize my string, we check to see if the action variable is set, which it is. Then we run the switch statement to check the value of the action variable. It checks to see if it's display. It's not, so it continues on to the next case, which is contact, which it is. If we scroll down and look at our form code down here, and we look at the hidden input called action, we see that the value is contact. So let's go ahead and scroll back up. So this is the code that we're going to run after here. On this first line, we're running var dump on the post array, which will expose all of the variables that got submitted in the form. If we jump back to the browser and we take a look at the source code, this is an easier way to look at a var dump. We see that the value of the post array includes a key of name, the value of which is Chris Shattuck, a key of mail, which has the value of learn@buildamodule.com, a comment, and attributes here. And you see that the attributes get pulled into this array here. There's one item and two items. The first item is interesting, and the second item is matching socks. So again, when we constructed the checkboxes in this form, we gave it an array structure. So if we jump back to the HTML, I'm going to go back to the editor, and I'm going to scroll down to our contact form, and I'm going to take a look at our checkboxes here. The name was attributes, and then we had an opening and closing bracket. So this allowed these two items to be pulled into a single array, which is going to be a lot easier for processing later on. Okay, I'm going to jump back to the browser where we're looking at the var dump again. And then finally we have our action, which is contact. So this was the first thing that happened when we ran our code. Let's go ahead and jump back to the editor here and scroll back up. So after we did a var dump of the post variable, we're then going to compose and send an email. So ultimately, we're going to run this mail function, which takes at least three parameters. The first is the email address of the recipient. The second is the subject line of the mail. And then the third is the text or the body of the email. So this is all it takes in order to send email in PHP. Now there may be a couple other things that you need to adjust in your PHP settings in order to get this to work. Depending on the stack that you're using to work with Drupal, the Apache PHP MySQL stack, and also your router or firewall can have an impact on whether this mail actually gets sent through. But if you run this code on a live server or a shared server, then you should have no problem sending this mail. For now, if you can't get this mail function to work, don't worry about it. You can come back to it later when you're ready to play with the configuration of PHP a little bit more. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back up here. So to begin with, we initialize our body variable by setting it to a value of nothing. This is so we can use concatenation on it without throwing any errors. And then we're going to loop through each post variable, and we're going to pull out the key and the value. Now you've seen this for each loop in previous videos. It will simply loop through each item that we saw when we exploded the post variable with var dump. It will loop through each one, and then it will take this body variable, and it will add the key, plus a colon and a space, and then the value of that key. So again, the key corresponds to the name attribute in the input, and the value corresponds to the value that the user inputted into that input. Or in the case of a hidden input or a checkbox input, for example, then it's going to have a value that we set for it. Now we're constructing a simple text-based email, and so in order to add a new line, we need to use the new line character, which again is a backslash and an N, but it needs to be surrounded by double quotes in order to work. So we add this at the end, so between each printed out item here, there's a new line. Once it's gone through each item in the post array, then we add some new text to the body that says, someone submitted a form on your site, here are the results. And then there's a new line, plus the body that we just constructed up here. Finally, before we send the email, we set what email we're going to send it to. Now, if you didn't get it initially, it could also be because this email address wasn't your own, so you could fill this in with your own email address. And then the subject line should say contact from site. If we wanted to preview this body text, what we could do is simply add a die statement. So what I'm doing here is adding a new line. I'm going to write die, and then I'm going to put body inside of that. What this will do is stop the execution of the script at this point and print out body. If we save this and we jump back to the browser and we close out the source code and we refresh, your browser may confirm that you want to resubmit this form, which we do. So I'm going to hit resend. And now in order to see the actual text, we need to look at the source code again. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And you see we have our var dump here. And at the end of that, we have our text for our email. It says someone submitted a form on your site. Here are the results. And it loops through name, mail, comment, attributes, which currently says array. So this is a point we can improve in the future. And then the action here is contact. That's also something we can improve because we don't necessarily need to pass that through the email. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this source code and go back to the editor where I'm going to remove this die and save it. And let's go ahead and jump back to the browser and refresh by clicking on the address input in the browser and hitting enter.